Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing another episode in my borrowing instead of buying series where I am checking out books from the library and reading those and supporting, the local library as well as just the library system in general here in the US. Okay, so what do I have going on this time? I'm super excited. I decided to try out a recommendation service from my library where the librarian recommends books for you to read. So, the entire background up to getting the actual books, I showed my channel members how that all went. But basically, I needed to fill out a form, and then I had an email exchange with one of the librarians. And then at the end of that, I had a bunch of books that I could go and pick up and check out. All in all, I got recommended 4 books by the librarian. 2 of them I had already read, but I'm happy to say they were books that I really enjoyed. One of them was Don Quixote, which I recently reread last year and still really enjoyed. Great recommendation. If I hadn't just reread it, I would have used that as an excuse to reread it now. The other one was Klara in the Sun, which I read, I think, when it first came out and really enjoyed that as well. It was definitely heavy on the science fiction in terms of recommendations, and I'm not upset about that because it's going to encourage me to try 2 sci-fi books that I have been interested in. So after going through the other 2, it kind of narrowed things down to me for 4. Normally, when I come to you with these videos, I have 4 books that I'm going to give a try, and then I choose one to read. This time, because I already read 2 of the books, I just have 2 books to share with you. So let me tell you what those 2 books are. The first one that I have here is The Ministry of Time. This is by Kaliane Bradley. I have not read this book. I feel like I've heard mixed reviews about it, but I'm kind of excited because a librarian has recommended it based on what she said, based on what I said rather, that I would like. So I feel like the chances of liking this are pretty high. This is a work of science fiction. As I mentioned, it is on the contemporary, which I'm imagining means soft sci-fi side, but I could be wrong about that. It has to do with space and time travel, where somebody has signed up to join the new government agency ministry, I guess ministry, where they're trying to see if time travel really works and how it affects the space-time continuum. And they're doing this by going back and getting expats from the past. Now, I don't know if they're famous ones or not, but our protagonist, I believe is a she, because that's what the blurb in the beginning made it seem like, is going to be helping out with this, and I don't know what she's going to be doing. But I think there's also supposed to be some romance in this, so it sounds like a fun read for sure. It's not particularly long. It's around, let's see, just over like 300 pages, so definitely seems like a good time. But again, I feel like I've heard very mixed things on this, but I don't know what. I just know that I've seen mixed reviews on it. So I'll try that one out, and basically the way this is going to work is I'm going to read each of these books for 15 minutes. Based on that very like small sample of the books, I'm going to decide which one I'm going to continue reading, and hopefully one of them will end up being a 5-star read. Now I have to say, this is, I think, the 3rd time I'm doing this, and both times I've ended up with at least a 4-star book. So I feel like this little library experiment is going pretty well, and it's making me want to like start trying it with my own books, as in like trying them for 15 minutes and then deciding which one to read. Might be giving that a try in the future. Okay, so the second book. This second book is The Three-Body Problem. I feel like this is a really well-known piece of science fiction, especially in the world of science fiction and even like in social media and that kind of thing. This, as far as I know, is a work of hard sci-fi. And the difference between soft sci-fi and hard sci-fi, at least the way I'm talking about it, is soft sci-fi like has science fiction elements like time travel, that kind of thing, but doesn't necessarily get too heavily into the science behind it. Like the time travel may be mentioned, that kind of thing, but then you're not going to get the details of how the science fiction is working. Now, I don't know if that's true of the Ministry of Time. I'm just assuming it's true. I know that The Three-Body Problem is considered hard sci-fi because the book supposedly goes over in detail exactly how the physics of things are working. And I've heard this is like mind-bendingly difficult, or at least hard. on the science. Now, what is this one about? This one has a secret military group who's been sending signals into outer space trying to make alien contact. Apparently, they do, but it's an alien civilization that's on the brink of destruction that decides to then invade the world. And then apparently, the world itself, as in Earth, is very split about how they feel about this. Some want to encourage the aliens to come and destroy or take over the planet because they feel like it's corrupt. Others are like, hold up, no, 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 no. So I like that premise already, where there's people feeling very different ways about the alien contact, and we're going to see how things go. So I guess if nothing else, in the first 15 minutes, I should get a sense of like how difficult these books are going to be to read. And then I can almost guarantee that which one I end up picking is just going to be based on my current mood. What I am excited about, however, is that I am in the middle of reading something else that's just kind of going okay, and I have it on audiobook. So hopefully this will give me a better paced and more gripping story to physically read in between my audiobook. But we'll see. Anyway, let me get into it. And yes, if you're wondering, my Christmas decorations are still up. I should have warned you at the beginning of January that all of January's videos are being filmed super early. And so you're going to have Christmas decorations all the way through January, maybe into February. Not even going to try and guess. Anyway, let me get going on these and I'll check back in after each one, tell you what my thoughts are, and then I'll come back at the end and tell you which one I'm going to read in its entirety.
I'm going to start with The Ministry of Time. Oh, there's a map. I feel like Dora having said that. Almost forgot to set the timer. Let's do that or I'll be reading forever. Here we go.
Okay, well, that was my first 15 minutes. I made it to page 12, and my first thoughts. This is actually, I feel like I want to say cute, which I feel like is condescending, but it's lighthearted in tone. There's definitely some humor, and I was absolutely 100% right that this book is soft sci-fi. And if you weren't sure, I picked out this little passage as an example. And it says, anyone who has ever watched a film with time travel or read a book with time travel or disassociated on a delayed public transport vehicle by considering the concept of time travel will know that the moment you start to think about the physics of it, you're in a crock of, and how does it work? How can it work? I exist at the beginning and end of this account simultaneously, which is a kind of time travel, and I'm here to tell you, don't worry about it. So that is kind of how you can identify soft sci-fi. In this case, very explicitly telling you we're not going to give you all the details. This book definitely seems like the focus is less on the technology and more on the human experience and the side of science fiction that is considering the ethics of what's happening in the science. So in this case, they are bringing people from the past into the present, and our narrator, who I still don't think has been named, she is working as what the ministry is calling a bridge, where she is the person who's supposed to spend a year with this historical expatriate and sort of help them learn how to live, or really just follow them and see if they survive living in the future. So this is both testing time travel itself and the effects on the human body, as well as the impact of bringing someone from the past into the future. Now, all of these people were supposed to, or did, die in the past. So they're guessing it's not going to impact the future or time or history that much. But again, our protagonist as a bridge is supposed to follow her person and see how that all plays out. And of course, she's immediately getting into the ethics of it and questioning things like, are we considering the fact that these people are not brought here, because they want to? And it is mentioned that most of these expats, as they're calling them, consider themselves to have been kidnapped in some form or another. So there's looking at that, bringing people into the future without their permission. It's also, how are they housing them? Is it ethical to just quickly introduce them into the current time and that kind of thing? So definitely looking at the ethics and the chaos that is caused with time travel, especially when it's not expected. So I like the writing of this. It seems lighthearted. I do think it would read rather quickly. So far, so good. So let me move on to the next book. The next one I'm going to go on to is the three body problem. I have my timer set, and let me go ahead and put my glasses on and give this a good 15-minute go and see which one is going to be the winner. It'll be interesting to see if in the 15 minutes, if I can also tell that this is definitely hard sci-fi. I know it is, but I'll see if I can find a good example to compare to the other one. Pretty in papers. Not really in papers, but ooh, a list of characters. Always an interesting sign. Okay. Well, that was easy. Just like what happened with one of the books the last time I did this, I don't need the whole 15 minutes to make a decision. And as I suspected, my decision is largely going to be based on my current mood and my current read. So, the three body problem. So far, can't tell whether or not it's going to be hard sci-fi or soft sci-fi, because right off the bat, the thing that's sticking out to me is the crossover in genre with historical fiction. This is getting a lot into the Chinese Revolution, which I should have realized because I'm pretty sure I've heard about that regarding this book before. And that is the military groups that are fighting right now. This is all happening in China. We've heard about Chairman Mao. There are these two different sides that are fighting, of course. And the other thing that's really standing out is the level of violence in this. So this is definitely going to be a heavier read, which I did expect. I don't think I expected the historical side of it or the sort of harshness involved in this. So I'm definitely taking that into mind as I'm deciding, and therefore I am going to go with the Ministry of Time. And I think the main reason, like I said, that I'm going with this book has more to do with the tone and feel of it and the lightness of it and the quickness of the reading pace, because I'm currently in the middle of reading The Weight of Ink, which is a pretty long novel and it is much slower paced. It's a work of historical fiction. And part of this book is set during the time period where people have been fleeing from Spain due to the Inquisition. And it's about the persecution of Jewish people during that time period. So you could see based on that how reading another heavy book where people are being persecuted and there's a lot of violence may not exactly be fitting the bill right now. Now, that does not mean that I won't at some point read this book or at least try more of it. I very well may do that, and I will probably read a little bit more of it before I return it to the library, just so I know whether or not to take it off a TBR. But then again, I might not, because if I'm not in the mood for this right now and I continue to read more of it, I will just nix it because it's not something I want to read right now. So I'll probably leave it there. I know that the writing is good enough that I would be interested in trying it again sometime, but now I know I'll need to be in for a heavier and darker read. So now I'm going to continue forward with this book. I'm not going to read it right this second because I have some other things that I need to get to today, but I may just finish off this video here or I may continue vlogging. I haven't actually decided, but either way, at some point in the future, you will be getting a full review and all my thoughts about the Ministry of Time, and crossing my fingers that this ends up being at least a 4-star. I think it will based on what I've read so far, but we'll see. I've been wrong before. So that's it for now. I'll either see you in the next clip or I'll see you next time. All right, so I have finished The Ministry of Time, and let me review this book, tell you about it, tell you all my thoughts. And I'm realizing at this point that if you join me regularly in sprints, you probably already have some idea of what I am talking about. I need to stop reading the books for this project in sprints because I'd rather it be a surprise to you. Anyway, let's get to it. This book, I don't think I told you at the beginning, is published in 2024. In fact, I don't recall anything that I told you about this book yet, so let's just let me pick up my paper here. Let me do a review. I know we did discuss that this is definitely soft sci-fi, and I'd say the trope that it's following is time travel. I've also seen people talk about like spy type movie, or at least spy book or movie type vibes, which I could see why people would say this. But this is basically about an unnamed narrator and her experience working as what they call a bridge, where her job in the ministry, the government ministry in the UK, is to act as a bridge connecting what they're calling expats, who are people that have time traveled from the past, and help introduce them into the 21st century, basically. And so our unnamed narrator, she is English Cambodian, and her mother is from Cambodia, married her father, who is English, and her sister have grown up in the UK. And so she also has an experience, or has experienced the idea of having a heritage of displacement, as she puts it. And I think that is kind of the reason that's given, that she is one of the people they choose to be a bridge, because she also understands and can relate to this idea of being removed from a time and place and all of that kind of thing. And she is to spend 1 year acting as the mentor, the bridge, the assistant, the helper to this expat. Now, as I believe I've mentioned before, the expats is what they've chosen to name the people who they have brought out of their past, out of literally the past, like the 16, 17, and 1800s. Now, it is questioned in this book whether or not these people are really expatriates because they haven't chosen to leave their time and place. They actually feel like they've been kidnapped out of their time and place and brought to a different time and place against their will. They were basically kidnapped. And so the story explores their experience through her eyes and her experience and what her job is as a bridge. This book covers a lot of different themes and topics, but basically, as the book itself says at one point, it's looking at grief, loss, and trauma, and the historical impacts of the choices that we make. There are a lot of other topics that come up in discussing that, like climate disasters, colonialism, the ethics of time travel and scientific technology, human ability to adapt, and especially discussions around refugees, people seeking asylum, and people who are displaced. The highs in this book for me were hands down everything related to the themes and the meaning of that. There was, like I said, a focus on the displacement, and I think the discussions that were had about that were really, really deep and really well done. I think she, as an author, did a really good job of connecting the experience of the time travelers to being very similar to the way people have always experienced displacement and seeking asylum somewhere else, and even being kidnapped and being displaced, whether it's by war, colonialism, or whatever. And I think I even have, yeah, I have a quote here, and it says, "The rhythms of loss and asylum, exodus and loneliness roll like floods across human history. I'd seen it happen around my own life." And I think that's exactly the idea that our author is trying to explore in this book. And I think it's really well done. And it was definitely my favorite thing throughout the book. I, at one point, thought this might be a 5-star read for me, which I was going to be really excited about. However, it kept getting the score knocked down bit by bit by some of the writing. And I have to admit, by the end of the book, I hated certain elements of the writing style. And hate is a strong word, but I really disliked it. And I don't usually have such a visceral reaction, but I think what led me to disliking some of the writing was the fact that it started to become a repeated element in the writing. And I'm talking about specifically the imagery, because I noticed at one point there was something she was doing in the writings that I repeatedly didn't like. And so I finally started marking it so I could go back and see if there was something similar about it. And there was. It was her use of imagery. I don't enjoy it. In general, it's a personal preference. I don't like a lot of creative imagery, metaphors, similes, those types of things in books. Just not my favorite because I don't think they're often well done. And in here, I don't think they were that well done. I think they were very cliche at times or cheesy, and the amount of them was too much. And because that can be a personal preference thing, I thought I'd give a couple of samples so that you could decide for yourself. Because one of the things I did find about this book that is very true is people either like it or really don't like it, and some are on the fence. But people definitely have opinions about this book. And I think a lot of it is coming down to the writing style. There were a lot of people that I got feedback from in my reading sprints who were saying they read this book and they didn't like it because as it went on, they felt like the genre blend kind of fell apart and it just became a lot of different genres. A lot of people talk about it being a mix of science fiction and literary fiction, but not in a way that they enjoyed. And it does seem like overall, if people liked the book or didn't like the book, that it was hinging on the writing style. So I think it is a very particular way of writing that you're either going to love or hate. But here's some of the instances that drove me crazy. And I double checked to make sure that none of these had spoilers in them, but they're perfect examples of what I didn't like in the book. So one of them says there were more piles of things around the house. The paperwork had started breeding in captivity. Plastic takeaway boxes stood on supra-cluttered surfaces, crammed with hand sanitizers, band-aids, elastic bands, bottle openers, and post-its covered in parental hieroglyphics. My sister jogged upstairs and underarm bowled my bag into my bedroom. I heard the crash of a column of papers. I don't personally enjoy that paragraph. I find there's just certain diction choices that are just unnecessary for what is being said. I also think you have moments in the text like this where you get a lot of like scene setting that feels super unnecessary and actually slows the pacing down of the book in a weird way. Like the fact that that house was cluttered is completely irrelevant to the story and didn't really tell me anything about the characters, about the setting, anything other than that the house was cluttered. And then we never came back to that thought ever again. So to then add that unnecessary paragraph in there with all of these things, and like I can't even say exactly what it is that irritates me about that paragraph other than some of the diction, the word choice in there. Not liking it. At another point in the book, she talks about how somebody in the book is treating her. And she says, he treated me as if my recipe had been changed and my flavor was unpleasant. You may like that. The reoccurring moments of writing, however, that I didn't enjoy was when a little bit of time would pass or the scene would change and there would be some reference to the weather or what the sky looked like or that kind of thing as a sort of expression that time had passed. And it was often done using descriptive words and some type of imagery. And it was done over and over again. It was the most frequent way of expressing that time had passed, either over the course of the day, weeks, months, whatever, seasons. And there was always an opening line to the next scene, and it always began with some sort of imagery that I hated. For example, there was navy blue nights wrapped plum and shortening days like a bandage. Fine capillaries of winter threaded through the autumn air. If you like that, you will enjoy this book. If you don't like that, you're going to get that over and over again throughout the book. I personally don't like that in writing. There's just something about it that is like nails on a chalkboard to me. That is super personal preference. Some people really enjoy that kind of thing. I don't like capillaries of winter. I also don't like navy blue nights wrapping anything like a bandage. I just don't. Like, I see the image and it's a weird one that I'm not enjoying. I also just think of band-aids, navy blue band-aids. Enough quoting. Maybe next time I'll bring you quotes that I enjoyed from a different book. I didn't give this book as low as a rating as you may think. I ended up giving it a 3.5, which I looked and is about the average rating for this book. And I think that speaks to more how well every other element of this book was. The themes and the meaning of the book, I think, were really well done. I thought the plot overall was pretty good, even though towards the middle of the book, the pacing kind of changed and it started to drag. I kind of needed it to be faster, honestly. Um, Slower, I think, would have made it worse. It at least needed to go back to being medium paced, which is what it started as. In fact, it even started as kind of fast paced anyway. And I did like the characters, though one of them was kind of a blank face and characterization through most of the book, but that didn't bother me personally. Didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I felt torn. I think it was lucky to get a 3.5 from me and not just a flat out 3. Um, so now I do have to say I would recommend this book. I would recommend it to people who like time travel, who like slow-paced books, who like books about displaced people, because I think that's probably one of the strongest elements of this book. And also, if you like sci-fi that focuses very strongly and heavily on the ethics of whatever technology is involved. This is soft sci-fi, so you're not going to get any deep explanations about any of the time travel technology because it is focusing more on the impact of that time travel, which does make sense in light of what the theme and the message of the book is. So I think it's a great book if you are somebody who likes a lot of thematic reading. I think it's very strong at that. And that said, I have heard that Dodo by Neil Stevenson has a very similar premise, but a lot of people think is better done. In fact, from what I could see in some of the online reviews, I think there's people who felt like this was even plagiarized from that. I don't know about that. I haven't followed any of that, and I haven't read the other books, so I can't say. But I would say if you want a book that's similar to that, to this one that a lot of people seem to think is way better, that would be one. I'm definitely going to try out Dodo at some point because I've eyed it over and over again at different points. I owned it at one point, but then had read something else by Stevenson and was like, no, thank you. And this was back before I really thought about the fact that authors don't always write the same in every single one of their books. And I've heard people say that that is true of Dodo. I will still probably try and get it out of the library. So maybe sometime in a future library haul that will come up. And my final thoughts are I do want to share how I feel about the fact that this was the recommendation I got. And I feel very mixed. I think it was a good recommendation. It did hit 99.9% of the things that I love. It was sci fi, it wasn't too heavy, it was what I was in the mood for. Which is why I went for that over the three body problem. It does feature a trope that I like, which is time travel. It was a unique and different story to me. I should have mentioned that flowery language, overly imaginative imagery is not my favorite thing. That is something that I know about myself, and I tend to lean away from literary fiction. And I probably should have stated that more clearly in my little form, because I think I mentioned there was a form that I needed to fill out. And she did ask me, she did follow up and say, is there anything you don't like? I should have just flat out said literary fiction. So that's my bad. She wouldn't have known that. I do think it's a good recommendation. You're not going to love every book you pick up. And I would totally try that book recommendation service again because two of the four books she recommended to me were books that I've read and really enjoyed. And the other two were books that I've been wanting to try. So I'm glad I tried this, even though it didn't work out. So that's it for this time. I am looking forward to checking out some more books from my library. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next, or really what I'm going to be reading next, because I do know what I'm going to be doing next with that. And I do also feel like I need to start keeping track of the other books from previous library hauls that I want to try. Maybe I'll do one entire episode that's just trying all the other books that, didn't make the cut as number one, like runner-up books or something. And we'll see when I get Dodo out, but that will be from a library haul as well at some point. So that's it for today. Let me know if this is the book that you would have chosen, or if you think I should have gone with the three-body problem. At this point, I'm pretty sure you're all going to tell me I should have gone with the three-body problem. Let me know which of the four books you would have chosen, and I'll talk to you next time.